We live in Taos, New Mexico, in the high mountain desert at the tail end of the Rockies. Ours is a quiet agrarian community dependent on a network of hand-dug acequias to water our gardens, crops, and livestock. In the land of little rain, our water depends on snowmelt and the summer monsoons. But in the 80s, as the earth heated up from rising CO2 and methane, the monsoons began to fail. Intensified by climate change, the whole Southwest has been in drought for a couple of decades, with increasing dryness in the past 2 years. The Rio Hondo, which runs through our property and used to give us good runoff, gave us no runoff in 2019. We are now in the worst mega drought in 1,200 years. In spite of exceptional dryness, the U.S. Forest Service continued to do prescribed burns under old safety standards. The whole process literally backfired when 2 prescribed burns, pushed by unusually strong spring winds, blew out of control in the mountains about 20 miles from Taos. The Hermit's Peak Fire and Calf Canyon Fire soon merged and threatened many small Hispano villages in the mountains, as well as Black Lake and Angel Fire, and a modern town with a ski resort. Many mountain villages and towns were being evacuated as the fire grew. Instead of watching the evening news about COVID and war in the Ukraine, my son and I were glued to the computer screen watching the evening INSEE reports on what was to become the largest wildfire in the state of New Mexico. At 341,735 acres, with up to 3,000 firefighters.
As we get up north of Chacon up there, then it's going to be an area to watch and see how successful the crews will be in holding that. Any spots across the line are going to be difficult to pick up, especially with those winds, and once that shuts down the aircraft, they'll be on their own to go toe-to-toe with that fire. We'll see if they prevail as they did down here on the 518, but if they don't, if that starts to move around, and do anticipate that to move off to the northeast, the Luna Fire scar is up there, so that will help hold some of that from spreading. However, that fire scar is extremely dry. The heavy fuels, the larger fuels, the trees, the dead trees, those are ready to carry fire, and they will hold and carry that fire. But I do think the fire is going to slip around the southern portion of that fire and spread out to the northeast there.
One of my concerns was that the fire might spread over the ridge to Taos Ski Valley at the headwaters of the Rio Hondo, and then down into our valley. Taos Ski Valley had some severe blowdowns last December, and a lot of down fuel just waiting for a lightning strike or some careless camper's match. During our daily walks up on the mesa, we watched plumes of smoke coming up from the south. One day, a pyrocumulus cloud collapsed and rained ashes on Taos. Taos was now in the planning stage. INSEE recommended that Taos residents remove firewood from the porch, the side of the house, cut the grass and dead branches, get rid of the brush. You have time to prepare for what's coming, he said. What's coming? And that sounded ominous. Even another lightning strike in this dry forest could have started a fire down the side of the hill. We cleared all this in one day. Then there was a little matter of finding crews to come in with trucks and take it away. And here's our crew taking a break with their doggies. And off goes the brush to the landfill. And that's a 5-hour wait some days. We had a close member of the family in Mora on a farm there, and we were worried about her because she was alone and didn't know how to drive the trailer and get out of there, but eventually some friends came and helped her evacuate. I was also concerned about the wildlife and what would be lost in a blazing, aggressive fire. And Piqueries Pueblo, what would they do if they had to evacuate? They raised a large herd of buffalo there. I had an opportunity to go and take some photographs of them for a story I was working on. very lively. I had read that we might see some new birds in our area that had escaped the fire. Last winter we had a flock of hundreds of jays in our neighborhood. And recently I had noticed some new birds at our feeder that I'd never seen before. A grosbeak and a red-headed finch, and this is a blue bunting. We were also warned about hungry homeless bears that might come wandering through. They were right about that. She was very polite. She ate up and left, and if I hadn't had a cam out there, I would never have known she'd been there. And here's an elk calf they found lying in the ashes in the forest. They took it in and started feeding it. Made everybody feel good, and us too. Thank you. After over a month with an intense battle with the fire and a visit from President Biden, New Mexico fires were declared a national disaster area. When the fire around Mora had finally been contained, Brian and I went for a drive to see how bad the burn was. While we were taking photos, a dark cloud rose over the mountain behind us. It turned out to be a pyrocumulus event that rose to 35,000 feet as the fire consumed another 15,000 acres to the west, and more ashes fell on Taos. And what did we do? We turned around and drove toward it because we wanted to see what it was that was burning. We wanted to know if the fire had jumped 518. Because if it did, it might burn all the way through U.S. Hill and down into Taos. But no, it had burned into the Pecos. It was about 1 in the afternoon and it was dusk. You could barely see the mountains. Ashes were falling on the windshield. We hurried home to Arroyo Hondo and I taped the windows shut. And we went to listen to the INSEE report.
Today we first had south winds about 15 and the southeast winds that pushed the fire across the drainage. I'm not sure exactly where it went across first, but it is well established on the northern side of that drainage. I can tell you that measuring off of these tiles and Google Earth and trying to figure out the breach points that we have of the areas that we're concerned about the fire being able to move it across from the south to the north into the middle fork of the Santa Barbara. This area right here.
God almighty, this whole thing's gonna burn.
Don't say that.
Well, I mean, yeah, well, I guess unless we get some moisture, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Is the one that's the closest. It was about 1.17 miles when I measured it out in Google Earth from the edge of the IR heat to the edge of to the middle of the ridge system. So I expect that there is multiple spots that are out in front of this fire. I also expect that this fire is going to keep moving to the northwest and to the north throughout the day. The airplane couldn't get under there. There's so much. The column pushed up, so the higher it goes, basically kind of indicating how much energy is below it, to 35,000 feet, and there's some lightning inside the column earlier today. So a lot of energy, and it makes it for a difficult environment for an airplane to get close to it. But they were able to get us these images of the edge that were necessary for me to be able to show you where that is.
And then the miracle that we had all been praying for, the monsoons came. Just what we needed. And suddenly everything turned green. Green. There was mist in the air, clouds on the ground rising up. Really beautiful. And everything just sighed with relief. But not in Mora, not in Chacon, not in Guadalupita. because they now had to worry about flash floods. Preparation and planning. They told them, don't try to drive through it. If you're on foot, climb to higher ground. Make an evacuation plan with your family, with alternate contingencies. But for us in Taos, suddenly everything turned various shades of green. Birds were flying on the thermals, big puffy clouds just like the old days over the mountains. Summer in New Mexico, the land of enchantment. This is how I remember it from back in the 80s. Cactus was blooming. Fields were green. Suddenly the weeds were up all around us and we were all sneezing. And all the rivers were muddy. This is the Rio Hondo. And in Mora, the river was even worse. This only lasted a couple of days, but in Mora it was muddy for a long time. All that ash and those logs and burnt logs and twigs washed down from the mountain. Brian and I decided to drive to Angel Fire and come back through Guadalupita to Mora on a narrow blacktop road that ran through a steep, narrow canyon. Signs warned us about delays. We were stopped a mile or so before a bridge and waited for half an hour for Mack trucks and 18-wheelers to pass. I had just picked up a copy of the Taos News, so I read a story about right where we were. Many slow-moving storms resulting in heavy rainfall were expected over the burn area on Wednesday afternoon and evening, July 13th, raising the prospect of more flash floods, while scattered afternoon and evening showers and thunderstorms are possible over the burn area through the weekend. Residents in part of San Miguel County, Mora County, and southeast Taos County have reported intermittent flooding over the past 2 weeks. Authorities have responded with truckloads of sandbags to distribute to residents. When it was our turn to drive downhill, it was scary to see how shorn up it was. Backhoes and dozers and gashes in the earth on both sides of the road, boulders strewn here and there. In Guadalupita, we saw trees burned up 40 feet into the air. Farms with the fire that came down right behind the houses. That must have been really scary. There was still some water in the road. We had to watch out for that. In Mora, there were still flashing flood warnings, sandbags in front of houses and shops, and a seemingly endless stream of trucks and other vehicles that were part of the mop-up crew. Thousands of people had been evacuated, many had lost everything. FEMA and the National Guard, fire engines and emergency vehicles merged on the town. Springs, public and private wells had been damaged. In the midst of flooding, they were hauling water. We were relieved to see that our family farm had survived, thanks in part to the hotshots who had trooped through, picking up every twig and board and stick of firewood, cleaning up the property. Then Mari told us they bulldozed an 8-foot swatch around the house, and they left. When the fiery fingers of flame backed down the hillside behind them at 2 a.m., the 2 men who had helped Mari evacuate went out with shovels and put out embers and flares for 18 hours. They saved the farm and the neighbor's house next door, but it was a close call. When the monsoons got serious, the nearby creek flooded their property. Fortunately, the National Guard had brought them 200 sandbags to protect the barn where the goats lived. The road was washed out for a while. We weren't sure it was passable, and Mari's phone was still out. Driving home, I felt sad for all those good times we had had together as a family at the farm. The games, the laughs, the wonderful meals. Those days were gone, We would never gather like that again. We stopped at an overlook to take photos of the seared Mora Valley. It had begun to rain and the air reeked with the sharp odor of resin. Below us, the lifeless bodies of cows, elk, and other animals had been dumped into the ravine. We drove over U.S. Hill through a blinding thunderstorm and home. I wondered how hard it hit Mora and how long the flooding would go on. The Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon fire is now 93% contained. Firefighters can't get into the Pecos because of the rough terrain. They are monitoring for hot spots and flares, so we'll see how that goes. July 21st. Mari called this morning to tell us they had another flash flood at the farm, both in the Acequia and in Canyoncito Creek, which overflowed its banks and flooded the field. The creek seems to have changed direction, she said. There's 8 feet of mud in the Acequia. This is going to go on for a while. Paula Garcia, executive director of the New Mexico Acequia Association, says, "We lost more than a beautiful landscape. We lost a way of life. The people are devastated. The villages and small ranches of Mora and San Miguel counties are the last refuge of the rural poor. Our communities will never be made whole, and we will never be the same. But we will stay, and we will rebuild in a tragically different landscape. We will love this land with her burned scars, and we will resolve to heal the place that nurtured our communities for generations." This morning, July 20th, INSEE reported a new fire in the Santa Fe National Forest. It has already burned 500 acres. Extreme weather, wildfires and drought, hurricanes and flooding worldwide are only symptoms of a larger catastrophe: climate change.